is going to be accused of being late. Welcome everyone to the Center for Latin American Studies. Today I have the huge honor and happiness to introduce my colleague and friend Mariana Muaze, who is an associate professor in the history department at the Universidade Federal do Estado de Janeiro, and also in the spring, the CLAS Billie Lozano Scholar. So for those who are not familiar with this program, the Billie Lozano Fellowship are fellowships, short-term fellowships that we, every year, we offer to two scholars working on Latin America with priority to the Amazon area. So we can, they come here, they develop their own research, and they help us enhance our collections at the library. So I'll pass the word to Mariana, and then she will talk, and then we'll entertain questions together.
Thank you. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you very much to the audience. So it's, I would like to start saying that I'm very happy to be here and at CLAS. I'd like to thank you, Kayla Greenberg, the director of CLAS, and also Kaymin and Luis that helped me a lot to be here. And the research that I'm gonna present today, it's more, it's a new project, but it's a new project which I'm visiting old sources that I worked with a long time ago during the 90s. So probably what I'm going to share with you here, it's more how those sources are amazing and can be researched for all different scholars, then like a conclusion of a research, because it's something which is in the beginning. So my presentation will be divided in three main parts. Okay, so first one, the justification of the project and its resources. So during the January and February 1997, I took part in the third and final expedition of the project Revisiting the Amazon of Carlos Chagas, organized by Casa de Osvaldo Cruz, Fiocruz, a sector specializing in history of health, one of the most important Brazilian institutions linked to the Ministry of Health. The project aimed to retrace the journey made by the sanitarist Dr. Carlos Chagas along the Acre and Purus rivers, located in the state of Acre and Amazonas, to compare the sanitary conditions of the riverside population in 1913, when the Carlos Chagas traveled, and in 1997, when were the contemporary expedition. It's important to note that Carlos Chagas expeditions along the Acre and Purus rivers in 1930 was not an isolated act. His crew made two other journeys around the Negro and Branco rivers and Juruá and Tarauacá in the Amazon region, financed by the Superintendents of the Development of Rubber. It was a Brazilian institution from the federal government. At the time, Brazil's Republican government aimed to diagnose the medical and health reasons for the fall of rubber production and draw up an intervention plan to reverse this process. It's worth remembering that even with the crisis in the price of rubber driven by competition from Malaysian latex, the product was still second in Brazilian exports, only behind coffee, which was also going through a period of declining prices of international markets. Sorry.
Can you show us on the map where is that area?
Okay, thank you. This was the idea. In this map, we have like more than the Carlos Chagas expeditions. We have also Belisário Pena, João de Albuquerque, Adolfo Luz. Carlos Chagas is those ones with big points in the upper of the map. This map is important also for you have an idea that how many expeditions the federal government paid during this time. Those have different like intentions and but they are between it's in the first decade, in the beginning of the first decade of 20th century. And we found out where I was. So the initiative of Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, Fiocruz, in 1990s involved Carlos Chagas' entire scientific path and was carried out in 1991 in Tarapá, Juruá, 1905, Negro e Branco, 1907, Acre, Purus, which was the exposition that I went with my colleagues from the field. The documentary collections produced during all the expeditions are open to the public consultations in the archive of Casa de Oswaldo Cruz, included a variety of reading documents, research reports, oral history interviews recorded on audio and video, as well as hundreds of photographs and hours of video recording. Contemporary expeditions have also led to a series of products resulting from this research. So this is some images that the idea of the expedition in 1997 was compare. We got all the reports. All the reports of Carlos Chagas, that he had a huge report of all the places that he stopped by, and he described the sanitary conditions and the populations. So we stopped at the same places, and we compare how many houses, what the sanitary conditions, the main diseases, and we interview the people. Sorry, for you have some ideas of what was produced, like as a result of those 3 big expeditions that Casa de Oswaldo Cruz made it during the 90s. We have 3 videos at the YouTube. One from the first expedition, Juruá Tarauacá. The second one, it's about Acre Purus, and the third one about Negro e Branco. So it's just if you type revisiting Amazon of Carlos Chagas project, you will find those videos. Are nice to watch. So we have also this book and this book. This is talking about all the expeditions that Fiocruz made it in the beginning of the 20th century. This was specific from the Negro e Branco, and this is the book that I wrote with my director about the health and the medicinal plants the traditions that we found during our research. So what is my proposal in this project now in 21st century? Because we jump like we are with 3 different times. The research are matched with 3 different times. So in the research project, rubber typing stories, orality, gender and work in the Acre Purus River Basins, 1912, 1997, I propose to use the same testimony collected during the 1907 expeditions to analyze gender relations and the social economic role of women in the communities visited. In the 55 hours of oral testimonies and life stories collected, this is just the 55 oral testimonies is just what we have recorded in cassette. I don't know how you say that because it's a very old technology. The tape, but we also had a lot of hours in video, recorded in video, which is also open for the consult. There were rubber tapers, midwives, prayers, community agents, farmers, and others who, despite the adversities, remained on the land and had their traditional knowledge recognized by other residents of this area. Several intersections times emerged from their interviews. Among them, what I call the time of rubber plantations is constantly mobilized as a time of long duration, a past common to the interviewers, their ancestors, and their places. A time of great difficulty, especially for the newcomers, but also a time of abundance and work. Emerge in this way, it's important, and a time of abundance and work. In this way, it's important to think what memories, individual and collective, have been mobilized about rubber plantations. How, after so many years of the dismantling of the rubber factory, did the riverside population, and especially the women, resist and kept their families in their respective allotments in the 90s? Did their way of life and traditional knowledge, or even some notions of right to the land, contribute to it? How did they perceive their social realities in 1990s? What social places and solidarity networks did they have in their localities to live? I put a wrong word. It's in the 90s. There are reflections that I intend, these are reflections that I intend to develop throughout this study. The rubber economy and the massive export of latex has been the topic that has received the most attention from historians investigating the Amazon. But Christina Wolf has shown, contrary to what the economy and wealth generation figures indicate, periods of crisis also bring significant social cultural changes that deserve to be investigated. From the gender relations perspective, the author points out that with the collapse of the rubber plantations in the second half of the 20th century, the women of the Upper Juruá began to act directly in the economies of their locality, taking off previously made male tasks. So could the same thing have happened in Purus and Acre? So I can tell you that the answer is yes until now. So, okay.
Those are indigenous people?
They are mixed. Like in the past, I will point it out.
Okay.
Yeah, but they are pretty much mixed with a lot of Northwest people, indigenous, and people from Europe sometimes. Adopting a similar perspective, this project investigates, using oral history methodology, the narratives of women of the forest about the so-called rubber plantations economy and its different areas, choosing the region of Acre and Purus river valleys and the 90s as the time-space frame for the analysis. We want to understand what role women's work played in the substance of riverside communities in the 90s. How did the women of the forest mobilize individual and collective memories of the days of rubber plantations to build a common identity based on allowing them to fight for their permanence and survival on their families in the forest. So I know that so this is the idea. We know how they resist and how they still there, besides everything that happens during the military dictatorship, as the deforestation, the policy of occupation, the subdivisions of and the sale of Amazon lands. Besides that, they were there in 1997. So how they could survive, they could keep their lands and their ways of subsistence. So third part. As anthropologist Terry Aquino says, it's necessary to build a history of Amazon that values indigenous histories and combats writing that takes the dominance of white man and his colonization as ground zero. In this way, the history of Acre Purus region goes back to a distant experiences of various nomadic hunter people, but also the first group that developed manioc planting, farming, pottery, and also complex indigenous culture, as we have Catuquina, Apurinã, and others that we found out. In the testimony collected in 1997, indigenous populations are very present. Their incorporation, forced or not, to work in the time of the rubber plantation is always remembered, as many as the interviewers had indigenous mothers, fathers, grandparents, and other relatives. But it could also be the other way around, as Raimundo Apurinã recounts. So I put his testimony in English and in Portuguese. Was tough to translate, so because it's a very colloquial, not just his testimony, but all the testimonies that I'm gonna show you was so hard. So I hope I have done a good work. So he said, in nowadays,
Is that good Portuguese, or they still have a local language?
Yeah, they had a local language. And he's also said that, like the old generations, they talk the indigenous language, and also Portuguese. Sometimes they don't talk Portuguese, just the indigenous language. But the new generations, sometimes they understand, they speak Portuguese, they understand the traditional indigenous language, but they don't speak. And on that time, he was really worried to make something for the new generation keep the traditions. So nowadays, we know that it's also good to live with white people because we learn many things in life. It's very important to us. I'm proud to be an Indian because the values that our people left for us, we never forget. We wear these white clothes, but when we need, we do any presentation of our culture. We know how to sing from our tribe. We do the cachiné, which is a dance, to do the demonstrations and everything. Whenever it's necessary, we do it. And that's why I'm proud that my children were born here. Only my wife is white. Now my parents, my grandparents, my mother, everyone is Indian. My family is all Indian. My wife lives here with me in the village. And her registration, he's talking about the FUNAI. It's a foundation to protect the Indians. This is the registration that he's talking about. Her registration is taken as an Indian. The way an Indian does it, she does it. She cooks, she grades, she makes bijou with tapioca. She does everything. Now, my parents, my grandparents, my mother, everyone is Indian. My family is all Indian. My wife lives here with me in the village, and her registration was there. Acho que eu tô me repetindo. Okay, so this is his testimony. But when it comes the present day, FUNAI's role, FUNAI is this institution that for Indians protection that I told you. FUNAI's role is always an important present, highlighted as an entire entity that regulate indigenous territory and improve relations with the Indians, popularly called Brabos. Brabos, it's like a indolent, is that this word? Now people that don't obey the white orders.
Yeah.
Insolent?
Huh?
Insolent?
Insolent.
No,
No, it's indolent. It's someone that you can't control.
Sort of the same.
Yeah,
sort of
like
the same
you
idea.
can't control.
It's a brave in the bad sense.
So another testimony. The Apurina indigenous are here from the 45th, which is like a neighborhood. They come from Acre and they go all over their area. There are not a lot of Indians, but very domesticated Indians, mixed with the people from Ceará. There are nurses, teachers, but when I arrived here, some was a bit indolent, like Brabos. FUNAI came and took them over, but they were already mixed up with people from Ceará and Bahia from the time of the rubber tappers and the rubber soldiers. They are already domesticated Indians. Now they are voters. They all have nice houses. I lived for many years with some Apurina Indians near Boca do Acre, and I learned how to make some natural medicaments with pau d'alho, jatobá, e piriparoba. Mr. João Antônio Ferreira Porto Duarte. So he reproduced a lot the language of the colonizers, like saying indolent or bravos, like saying they were domesticated. But from the stories and the testimony of the interviews, it's possible to see multiple perspectives of time that are mixed up, especially among the experience of the so-called Arigo, the first wave of northwestern settlers who set up to produce productive structures of the rubber plantations in 19th century and others. The testimony is indirect and reproduced from an oral tradition based on collective experience, especially the descriptions of the trajectories of fathers, mothers, and parents. The idea here is shows to you that people that I interview, they can tell the story of the whole region, organizing different times and having the exactly conscience of the differences between what happens in the like old time ago when the first settlers arrived, and then after the crisis, the first crisis of the rubber plantation, and then later the time that we call rubber soldiers during the Second World War. So they mix the testimonies, but they can separate it and have the idea of the history and of the times that are mixed and related. I think, sorry, this was the one that I read without showing you the okay. So this is the first one. So one of the interviewed said, Senhora Vilce Pereira Glaucio, in Beruri, she said, I was born on January 18, 1916. My father came to Amazonas a long time before, at what time when there are the guys called Brabos, Dolmentor. After Arigó, it was Arigó. My father came to work on cutting the sering and sorva, which was another tree that also gave milk. So the Arigó for them is the word that they use to talking about this time, like really in the past, almost in the 19th century, the time of the first settlers, people that built the rubber plantations. The historiography of Amazon points out as early in 1860s, the first expeditions of explorers made a reconnaissance of the best places to set up rubber plantations and explore latex on a large scale. At the time, indigenous people were treated as obstacles to be dealt with. The time of Arigós began when armed expeditions were recruited to kill the indigenous chiefs, imprison the men for work, and capture the woman to reward the rubber tappers. Not without resistance, many indigenous nations were pushed to the most distant regions or violently exterminated, while others ended making deals to survive, with their members being incorporated as mateiros or helpers, interpreters, guidance, or rubber tappers. But most of the labor force that set up in the rubber plantation were men and immigrants, mainly from the Northwest Brazil, who had fled the drought of 1870, like Vilce's father. The bosses who owned the rubber plantation had the monopoly of the sale of rubber, as well as industrialized and imported goods, which they acquired in the storehouse through the advanced payment, making a profit of both sizes. Between 1880s and 1910, the exploration of latex generated by the wealth of the so-called black gold, which mainly benefits the owners of the rubber plantations, the aviation houses, and the large export companies. That's why in many interviews, the time of Arigó or the time of rubber plantation or the time of Brabos sometimes were equivalent. After 1912, due to competition from Malaysian rubber, after England took the Amazon plant and orchestrated its planting on an industrial scale in Malaysia, rubber prices and Brazilian exports fell. It was the so-called time of the rubber plantation crisis, when the bosses who owned the rubber plantation continued to be violent and demand productivity. But the payment for work was scarce and often caused debt in the storehouses, as it was not enough to pay for products and food consumed during a month. It was on occasion that expedition of Carlos Chagas was organized to understand the reasons of such a decadence. The temporality that shapes the first crisis of rubber plantations also appears in the testimony. So now we are in the, I was born, because I mixed it some order, but it's all in this slide. I was born in Ceará, in a municipality called Baturité in 1896. That's the year I was born. My head is already very weak. I came with a relative. When I arrived here in Rio Branco, there was nothing there at the time. Yet there were only ships that went around. That was no land. Everything was by water. There was no road to anywhere. The only road to Acre was the river. I came in the 12th because I felt like it. I still very young at that time. Then I only heard about Amazonas. At the time, there was no talk of Acre. No, it was Amazonas. Everything was Amazonas. Then we came to the rubber plantation. I found a man who was good to me. This storehouse was all made of wood, and people's leaves, the customers arrive because they in the tradition, and they call the workers as customers, because they had to buy at the storehouses of the plantation. So this is the word that they traditionally use. Were just rubber. They didn't have the right to plant anything, just to cut rubber. Then they cut the rubber. So their business with boss was just to make rubber, deliver rubber, receive goods. Francisco Menezes, Chapuri. Another testimony from Maria do Carmo Gomes da Silva, Bom Destino. I've never seen a boss do anything bad to anyone who was taking a product. But my father-in-law, my husband's father, says he's seen rubber plantations here. In the days of Arigó, in the days when they were bosses, he says it was beautiful here. But what they did was kill the people who had made a lot of money. And in the end of the year, when they went out to collect their salary, they would kill them. I was tired to listen to him telling me this, and also her father-in-law. In the testimony, the temporality are mixed. The economic difficulties experienced in 90s made the interviewers portray the period of strong latex exploration with a certain nostalgia. Mr. Francisco Menezes considered his employer as good boss, despite the prohibitions on planting subsistence crops, the obligations to buy products of the property's storehouse at exorbitant prices, or the monopoly on the purchase of rubber. the situation of decadence experiences during the 1912 crisis was alleviated during the Second World War, with the revitalization of rubber exploration through the so-called rubber soldiers program afforded by United States. People that come to work were mainly came from Ceará with 2 years of contract. Around 36,000 people were involved between 1942 and 1944. With the end of the war, the system was dismantled and workers' effort were only recognized in 1988 Constitution, when they began receiving a lifelong pension of 2 minimum wages from the state. In 1997, the people in the best economic conditions in the old rubber states visited were those who received this benefit, which was also extended to relatives after the beneficiary death. So, Teresa Lima Lopes said, I came when I was 12. Ceará is a very good place, but when there was a drought, we went to Piauí. We went to Piauí for 2 years, in 1936 and 1942. Sorry, 1932 and 1942. The last time we went straight to Acre, to Amazonas, where there was a government conscription. My husband came during the war. He is a rubber soldier. He came in the 42 single and made his home in Paracá, which is a seringal, a rubber plantation. Teresa also says that she moved with her father and 7 brothers to União Rubber Plantation and after to Alagoas Rubber Plantation. There, Seringal, Alagoas, we left a lot of products planted and we did a lot of farming in the allotment. It was good there. It was good for milk, the milk that she's saying it's the milk of the lactates. You get 10, 12 cans of milk. There, I use it to cup in with my 4 brothers and dad. Then there were these basins. I just used the fire to heat it up. It was the one who smoked it. Some people work in the fields, other gated coconuts, everything. Everyone working. I also work in the field. My sister looked after the house. As interviews shows, with the crisis, the figure of the boss lost importance, and the rubber plantation was gradually replaced by what they call colocação, which were the same territory, but with the rights to hunting, fishing, and extract activities practice that had little importance or were forbidden when the rubber plantation were in full operation until 1912. Teresa Lopes and other interviewers said that with the decline of rubber plantation, there was a diversification of economic activities that made it possible for women and their family group to become more involved in production and subsistence. There was the basis for the new social and economic organization, which woman acquires new roles as intended to demonstrate the course of the research. So I don't want to, I will jump a little bit, but it's important that we know that during 90s, we usually talk about the 90s as a as a time of crisis. But I also want to pay attention that, however, these enormous losses, we have to point out that 90s was the time where the first FUNAI office in Acre was created. We have like big fights for the demarcation of land. We have like the first rubber tappers union, also with important leaders as Wilson Pinheiro and Chico Mendes. Those movements were so important during the 1988 Constitution to create what we nowadays call extractive reserves. And so I know that what we had experienced there was a time, or very precarious time. We also can do a contrast that other things were happening that maybe we have to pay attention to when we are studying this location. So these are also another testimony of Francisca Silva de Oliveira that she talked about the soldiers of rubber. And she's talking about her father in specifically. He could cut syringes anymore, so he quit and went to work in the colonies. He took care of the colony and was now died on the age of 60. Easy to say that at the time the rubber plantation had conditions, they had bosses. Everything was in order. Everything was well organized. He cut the trees, took the produce from month to month, and took it to the headquarters. And everything was better than is today. Today, nothing's like it used to be. The product today is priceless. Whatever the rubber or nuts, nothing has prices. And I asked her, do you think it's better to work on a rubber plantation or in a colony? So, well, in the colony, but only if it's our own land, our own colony. Now we can't work for another owner, just to look after other people's colonies, because what we do isn't for us, it's for the owner. Now, if it's our own, that's right. It's enough for us to survive, because to take our own produce to town and sell it. So Dona Francisca recognizes the difference in working condition in the rubber plantation and in the colony, and points out the importance of owning the land to guarantee better life conditions. Before the colonization program in the Amazon that were stimulated during the military dictatorship, many former rubber steppers and other populations began to occupy the land independently and remain in their old settlements, but without the land ownership. In these new times, women's production for family survival become essential. Francisca Cândida de Souza tells us, syringe planting, that's what we did most. I've suffered a lot, my darling. Look, I cut rubber, I planted, I cut with an axe, I planted heavy tanaranga, which is a plant. I planted on the beach with the place close to the river. I plant beans, I plant all the vegetables I needed. When I was single at home, we worked very little. But once we got married and started having children, we were forced to work more. The husband looks for one part and the wife looks for another part. Besides looking in the rubber plantation extraction, mainly Brazil nuts and piaçava, the riverside population produces subsistence crops and raises animals for their livelihood. In the localities visited, I also found some initiatives founded by the state of philanthropic entities aimed at qualifying women and improvising local health, such as the case of the pharmacies for home remedies, where Maria do Carmo Almeida work founded on initiative of Pastoral of the Health, which has in Boca do Acre a big pharmacy to attend the poor population. So those women, despite the economy and the social precariousness encountered, there was aware of the change in labor relations in search of better survival conditions. This awareness was evident in the words of Dona Francisca de Oliveira, which is this one of the picture, who knew value of working on her own land, but also in the words of Maria do Carmo Gomes da Silva, a resident of Bom Destino Allotment, who said, "We used to have bosses, little sister, who were subject to them. Not nowadays. Thank you, God. We were free. We make our own products, sell them whenever we want. But in the old days, when I was a girl at home, it wasn't like that." So thank you.
How they became free? Do they have money and then they bought land, or how?
Yeah, they were not prisoners. But you know, they had a special contract that they had to buy everything from the storehouse of the plantation, in which what happened is that they also had to sell all the rubber that they made inside the plantation. So the price, the owner had the monopoly of the price, and he also had the monopoly of all the goods that were sold on the plantation. So it's very disbalanced. Sometimes they work a lot and they knew that the rubber had a good price, but they couldn't keep money with them. But you know, this is the memory that they had from the really old times, the Arigó times. And then when what we call the rubber soldiers time, the memory they have is more, they are more autonomous. They can plant and they work with the latex at the same time. They can have their families, but they cannot sell the rubber for other planters. They have to sell inside and buy inside the plantation. But they also can plant, and they can go to the forest and search for animals. So they made their schedule more freely than in the old times. And after what I realized in the 90s, like that structure doesn't exist anymore they feel like, they use that word, they feel like we are abandoned here. They let us here. The government brought a lot of people from here from the time of the rubber soldiers, and then when it's done, they abandon us here. And they also talk a lot about the people that are expelling them from some places for cattle raising, for soja, how to say, soja, soy plantations during the military dictatorship. But at the same time, they feel like if they are in a land that nobody wants, because they are more freely and they feel like they are the owner of that land. So they plant, but they also say, oh, there is no more the boats that used to come to the river all over the river, bringing goods and commodity. It doesn't happen anymore, and they feel like they are abandoned in this interior. But at the same time, they can. They were, especially the woman, I could see they were doing something else, like these pharmacies of medicaments. They were getting organized for some extractivist activity. But I think what I saw was like just the beginning of something that in nowadays it's much more stronger. I made a quickly research at the internet. There are a lot of cooperatives of women from for these extractivist activities. And I'm not saying that it's a paradise. I just wanted to show that probably what we see today, I saw like a seed of it, because there was the thing was so bad that maybe they had to do something different. And I also know that we changed the politics for the Amazon. Like during 70s, during the military dictatorship, until the 80s, the forest good was the forest that you could derrubar, né? Put it down, for sell the wood and etc. Now the forest good when it's still in pé, né? Still there, still alive. And so they are changing the mentality, and I see some connections. Beside all the precariousness, I saw it. I think there is a connection. And also, of course, these connections also get strong when we have a public politician that do something for it happens, like and also the civil society, like a lot of ONGs, the idea of social responsibility. Things change a lot, but I want to see that they were part of this changing too. And how? This is what I'm trying to get from these testimonies, which is hard in somehow, because when I made the interviews, these were not my were not what I was looking for. I was looking for something completely different about the health conditions, etc. But as I work as the trajectory of life, the memory of life, they had to tell me a lot about their life, the parents' life, how they were there, etc. I had a good good picture of them, of what they were doing.
So I was going to ask you this. So it's like the kind of interview that you were doing were live interviews, not without specific questions
No,
about labor or about
no.
race. So it's just
Those
where the
parts I caught
yeah.
from the
But
part
how-
that I asked about their lives.
And how many interviews total you have?
I made around 60, I have the list of them. It's around 60 interviews. But for this presentation, I got just the one that I made it.
Yeah, but all of them talk about, I'm curious about the things that they will talk without you asking. So it's like all of them will talk about labor, or no, all of them will talk about gender, those gender divisions of labor as you showed
I
there.
usually don't interrupt them. I usually made a
No, I know,
a huge-
but those themes will come up
Yeah.
in all of them of, because that's, I think it's an interesting thing, like
It's
if
a
you are not
repetition.
asking what
No.
what they're telling you about their lives, even though you're not asking.
Yeah, I was not. Because I just asked, where are you born and how was the time? Tell me about your life. And they organize their lives, talking about labor, talking about this time of Arigo, this time of the rubber plantation, the crisis. And this was the part that I asked was the medicinal part that I said, what kind of medicaments do you usually use for headache? And then they I use this and that. How you get that? How do you invent a medicament? This was the second part of the interview. The first part was just their life. And so this is why I thought was so rich and allowed me to do other questions with the same interviews. Because if I had done like a survey more with more direct questions, it was not possible.
Yeah. And what about race? Because one is that one that you said that it's a white person with this indigenous group, but does race appear often in the others, or?
No. It's more when they are contrasting them from the indigenous group. And it's so funny because there is a lot of indigenous person, they say, my mother was indigenous, but he's not anymore. My father was indigenous, but he's not anymore. For them, indigenous are the ones who are in the aldeias, in their places, like in the reserves and etc. But it's funny in that sense.
So how is going with children, youth? Are they leaving or they stay with parents? Do they stay there? Sustainable stuff.
They said that they complain that the new generation are leaving. They also complain that the new generation doesn't allow them to treat them with plants, medicaments. They want to go to the hospital. So sometimes they complain that they are living in But sometimes they also say, oh, but they are leaving because we don't have enough conditions and they are our work. They are trying to find out something better for their lives. But it's also funny because one thing that repeats, one experience that repeats a lot is that people that went to the cities, which are very small in cities, they don't go to Rio Branco, Manaus. They usually go to Chapuri or Boca do Acre, like medium cities. They go there and they said, oh, I came back. I couldn't stand. I don't like there. I don't like there because I had to eat what I buy and not what I plant. They said that a lot. Somehow I made experience. My daughter told me to come to Boca do Acre. I went, but I couldn't stand. I came back. And it's the experience of migration inside the same region. It's so strong because they also using it to migrate from one rubber plantation to another sometime, especially in the crisis time. And they still doing this from one colocação to another, or from one small city to the colocação and then come back to the city. They are in movement.
And how is now rubber industry? There's any exploitation, like export is still the second.
It's not more industrial scale, but especially in those stratigraphic reserves, they are getting back to it, but for do some artisanat, some product, natural products, or bolsa, purse, or more for personal use, not for in an industrial scale that how you use it to be.
Did you record any music or something like customs, tradition? I mean,
I work with the interviews that I made, but my chief or my director, my chief on that time, Fernando Dumas, which was who invented this whole project to go to Amazon and make the expedition of Carlos Chagas again. It's all related to him, his idea, which was great, and he was the one.
Yeah, you said on video, right? We should do.
Yeah, he was the one who coordinated the three expeditions that went there. He made all the interviews in video. I usually go to first to interview people on the tape using the record tape, and I use it to say, oh, this person is a nice person. She talks well. She has a lot of information to give it to you, and then he goes and made another interview.
The link on YouTube.
I can.
The first one, so that I can write.
For example, this picture I took from his video.
So just.
But if you write Revisitando a Amazônia, you're gonna find it.
Do we have any other questions? I think this is amazing how we can think about, having this kind of archive And I guess for the students that are here, this is also so interesting to think about sources that were designed in one purpose and then become relevant in something else. Jen?
Just because you start to talk about the Carlos Chavez expedition and had with a goal to map the diseases in the Amazon, but also to serve for preserve the workforce in the rubber plantations. Like the government encouraged new medicines, new researchers for preserve these diseases, and but also the goal is preserve this workforce. So my question is, in your research, how you see this how do you see the persistence of the model of colonial, because this is a very colonial model, and how can the oral narratives help to break stereotypes, like build new perspectives about the indigenous people, the right-sided, the women?
I think we have to think about these scientists, Carlos Chagas, or even Oswaldo Cruz, or Belisário Pena, or the others that were shown in the map, in the context of the science of the beginning of the 20th century. So they were like maniac with that idea of hygiene and sanitarization. So for them, they would solve the whole problem of the decay of the rubber economy with a good sanitary plan. So if you read his report, this is the idea of his report. So he's so meticulous of the descriptions of the disease because he wants to solve it. And this time was the first expedition that, not this in Amazonia, another one before, not with Brazil, was when he discovered the doença de Chagas, the Chagas disease, which has his name. And so for him, he would solve this economical problem with this sanitary plan. But when he described people that were in the forest and that were in the places that he visited, it's pretty close to Jeca Tatu do Monteiro Lobato. Assim, he judged. He's like, he thinks, oh, poor people, they don't know, they are alone here, they don't have sanitary conditions, but at the same time, he judged, like he has some, he thinks in a scale of civilization, if it's there, this idea, it's there in his report. But also, is there the idea that can be solved, which is not like natural or for all the scientists on the same period, because we also had another line of scientists during this time that would say, oh, there's no way, because they already mixed the miscegenation that they had between Indians and people from Northeast. It's a lost civilization. There is no way to build a civilization there. No, he thinks it's possible, but we have to do a huge plan to make better all the sanitary conditions. Expliquei?
Yes, yes, it's because we had a long period, like you stood this since the beginning of the Carlos expedition, like almost day nowadays. So I interesting like if had some difference between this report and they nowadays narratives about these people like indigenous. So about this stereotype vision, you know.
But where in the scientific report, where
About your oral narratives, like
the one that I took
yes,
about the yeah, they are judging. They think they are less civilized. They think that be part of the plantation, be part of the white world, it's better than be an Indian. So they judge. I know that he said, "Oh, I learned a lot with Apurina Indian. He taught me how to do a medication." Da, 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 da. But he also said he was brabo, he was insolent. The Funai came and domesticated him. So he used the language of the colonization, and he doesn't have any criticism on it. He uses it. And I think they act like that too.
thank you.
I also have a question. Thanks for your talk. I would like to ask you how you perceive the gender relation on your research so far, because we're talking almost like we have a almost 30 years gap, for example, for the first time you interview them to now. And I keep thinking that the testimony itself, it doesn't, they don't give us some answers. So I will first of all like to ask you that. How you perceive in that gender relation, because when we're talking about gender, we are talking about power as well. And I think that for the examples that you brought to us, the gender is not just about the women over there, like history of the women, but it also in this masculinity that says the indigenous people, they are bravos, they're like this whole figure that is still, for me, still very colonized and stereotypical view of them. So I would like to ask you if you go through it also on your research. I know that's ongoing.
In the beginning.
Yes, it's really in the beginning, but I keep thinking about it because nowadays the indigenous movement in Brazil is very strong, especially the women. They have association that's Amina, and Amina was found like I think they have less than 10 years, and we're talking about feminism inside the indigenous community. So I don't know, when we're talking about gender, this kind of relations, they're always changing, and I would like to ask if you're gonna do like this on your research, because that's at the beginning of the last century, it's something gender, and nowadays it's a totally different question. And I don't know, I just would like to ask you about it.
Thank you for your question. I think it's great. My idea, I'm not gonna talking about nowadays. I will stop on the 90s because I already have 1912. The expedition of Carlos Chagas. I had the Soldados da Borracha time, like during Second World War, and the military dictatorship and the 90s. I think like those 4 times are the strongest ones that are developed in the narrative. So I'm gonna stick with them. But I think you are right, you know, but I will try to talk about gender, but looking at the 90s. And what you call my attention, it's so important, like bravos, arigós are always words related to men. And because that society was a society with which the men had a lot of power. They were the main labor force. But what I trying to show that in the crisis of this society that the man was so predominant in the labor force, what happened is that the disbalance of gender in terms of the labor force changed, because was during the crisis that women start to be more important in terms of the economic survival, and then I think they could change it, this balance. So when I was there interviewing them, I wouldn't say that the man was the main labor force in 90s. It was more mixed. And so for today, my idea was just bring the idea of different layers of time and how these different layers of time were there in their testimony, and how they can organize time, their history time, but also their community history about these layers of time. But I think you are right. It's just the beginning. I think I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to leave this room for another event that will start soon. So I want to thank Mariana. Thanks for this wonderful presentation. And I forgot when when's the next one, not next week.
March 27th.
37 is the next event, and tomorrow there will be a movie here, A Day Without a Mexican at 6:30, and you're all invited. And if not next, March 27th, in a month. Yeah, okay. All right, so thank you. Hope to see you all soon.
Obrigada.
Sai da sala.
Eu, Mona Linda.